The Greco-Italian conflict entered its conclusive phase in late February, when it became impossible for the Greek forces to continue their advance into the Albanian heartland. At the same time, the Italians made intensive preparations for a spring offensive that would be the last attempt to defeat the Greek army before the impending German intervention in northern Greece. The plan was devised by General Cavallero. He envisioned a large-scale attack on a narrow 32-kilometer front in the center of the Greek line, with the KoolaDoora Pass as the objective. The main attack would be carried out by 3 divisions of the 8th Army Corps, along with 2 elite black-shirt battalions. The Greeks were defending this area with the 5 divisions of the 2nd Corps. Divisions from other sectors were ready to reinforce the 2nd Corps if necessary. 4 days prior to the Italian offensive, the commander of the 2nd Corps was replaced by Major General Bakos. The former commander, Lieutenant General Papadopoulos, was discharged when he objected about the presence of a British expeditionary force in Greece, which was inadequate to defend the country, but sufficient enough to provoke a German intervention. The offensive began on March 9th with a heavy artillery barrage and air bombardment on the entire front line, but with more concentration on the sector of the 1st Division. Over 100,000 shells were fired in 2.5 hours before the infantry attack. The first attack was carried out by the 38th Division. The Italians were confident of a quick victory. After such an intense artillery barrage, they expected that all Greek frontline troops would be dead by now. They soon found out that the casualties inflicted by the artillery were minimal. Once the Italians came close to the Greek line, they received small arms fire. After 7 hours of fighting, the Italians captured Hill 717, but failed to capture Hill 731 and retreated, having sustained heavy casualties. As the Italians were retreating, the Greek artillery opened fire and inflicted even more casualties to the 38th Division. When the commander of the 2nd Corps realized that the Italians were concentrating their attacks on the center of the Greek line and Hill 731, he reinforced the 1st Division with 2 battalions that were in reserve and 1 regiment from the 6th Division. He also gave permission to the divisional artillery to ignore restrictions on the consumption of ammunition. 2 more attacks followed on the next day that were again repelled with heavy losses for the 38th Division. On March 11th, the Italians tried a flanking maneuver instead of a frontal assault. This time the Greeks assaulted the Italians with fixed bayonets. The 38th Division lost its entire attacking force. 250 men were killed and 521 were taken prisoner. After this defeat, the 38th Division was withdrawn from battle and replaced by the 47th Bari Division. The 47th Division started its own series of attacks against Hill 731, hoping to achieve a different result. By March 15th, the total number of attacks against the hill amounted to 17. The Italians halted the offensive for the next 3 days, allowing the Greeks to deploy their reserves and reshuffle their line. The 17th Division replaced the exhausted 1st Division, which occupied secondary positions in the same sector. The offensive resumed on March 19th, with the 51st Division launching the 18th attack against Hill 731. Supported by 4 tanks, the Italians seized a portion of the hill but were soon pushed back again by a swift counterattack. More attacks followed to the north and south until March 22nd, when the Italians asked for a ceasefire to collect their thousands of dead soldiers and give them a proper burial. The Greeks agreed, but wanted the ceasefire to be effective across the entire front line. The Italians rejected these terms because they were more concerned about the appalling scene in front of the hill. After the negotiations failed, the Italians retaliated with a 24-hour artillery barrage. In the morning of March 24th, the Greeks repelled the last 2 attacks against Hill 731 before the Italian command admitted that the spring offensive had failed. Casualties on the Greek side amounted to 1,243 dead and 4,016 wounded. The total Italian casualties are estimated to be at least 11,800 dead and wounded. The spring offensive failed because of 3 critical mistakes. The Italians were concentrating their attacks on one point, hoping to breach the enemy line and then outflank the Greeks, while other units would advance deeper into enemy territory. But the direction of their main attack was on ground that favored the defenders. The road in the sector of the 1st Division made the transfer of forces and supplies much easier than in other sectors of the 2nd Corps. The Italians had better chances of success on the right flank of the 2nd Corps. In that same area, the Greeks were able to defeat the Italians during their own offensive the previous January, which took place under heavy snowfall. Another mistake was the use of artillery and bombers only against frontline troops. The artillery destroyed the communications and the surface fortifications, but most defenders survived each artillery barrage unharmed and then poured deadly fire into the advancing Italian troops. Meanwhile, the Greek artillery was firing without ever being harassed by the enemy. Forward observers in the Greek army were well trained, and thanks to them, the artillery delivered accurate fire in every fire mission. But the biggest mistake of the Italian command was the repetition of the same tactic for 2 weeks, changing only the time of attack or switching from day to night attacks. Hill 731 was attacked at least 20 times. The intense artillery and air bombardment destroyed the landscape and reduced the height of the hill by 2 meters. The battle for the hill has been described as the Verdun of the Greco-Italian War. Although the spring offensive failed, it weakened the already exhausted Greek army. By the end of March, the Greeks were down to less than a month of ammunition. In an effort to keep Greece in the fight, the British transported 62,000 Empire troops to the Greek mainland, along with weapons and ammunition for the Greek army. With the bulk of the Greek forces in Albania, the Eastern Macedonia Army section was left with only 70,000 men against the German 12th Army, which created a second front on the 6th of April, 1941.